Hello, my name is Mark Taylor and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hello, welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast. Thank you so much for joining me as always, and thank you to everyone who's been sharing the show with all their friends and colleagues and family. It really makes such a difference to us to be able to make as much impact as possible and share these amazing stories. So yeah, please keep doing that, and I really do appreciate it. Now, today I'm delighted to be chatting to Jennifer Redmond, and she's part of the BBC Philharmonic Digital and Learning Department, and they've got a new project out, Musical Storyland, and it's a way of bringing together how you learn about the musical instruments. It's partly animation, it's there for CBeebies, and so I'm delighted to be able to sort of share Jennifer's background from a musician's point of view and into this sort of educational style. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Mark.
So take us through, first of all, that Musical Storyland. How did that come about and what's it involved?
So I'll explain in a nutshell what Musical Storyland is. So it's a series of films for featuring instruments of the orchestra. It's accompanied by resources for teachers, all on the BBC Teach website. Now, what's really interesting about Musical Storyland is the very first time that an orchestra has been commissioned to make television programs for network television. We were commissioned by CBeebies to make the series. So this is sort of just over a year ago now. And, that's never happened before. An orchestra, so I work for the BBC Philharmonic, which is an orchestra based at Media City in Salford. And we do all sorts of activities and concerts and performances and recordings for young people and education. But we've never been commissioned to make a series for network television before. And it came about in a really unexpected kind of way, actually. During lockdown, we made a film of one of our existing workshops. It's called The Musical Story of the Gingerbread Man. So that was a workshop that one of our musicians created a while ago and has been touring it to schools and around and about for quite a long time. And during lockdown, we couldn't take our musicians into schools or anywhere. So I thought it might be interesting to try and make a film version of this workshop. So we did. It turned out really rather well. And CBeebies got hold of it and said, can we broadcast it on the channel? Which was really exciting. It was never intended for broadcast. We were just going to put it on the Philharmonic website. So that was fantastic. And it was broadcast and it's been on iPlayer ever since. And it has been incredibly popular there. It still is watched by tens of thousands of children every week. And so as a result of that being broadcast, we were then approached by the CBeebies commissioners to make 10 more similar films, which we did. And brilliantly, because BBC Children's and BBC Education are now part of the same department, Education found out that we were doing this and saw the potential for the classroom and wanted to get involved as well. So it ended up being a three-way collaboration between three BBC departments, so Children's, Education and the Philharmonic. And that in itself is also unique, that sort of three-way collaboration doesn't happen so often in the BBC. So we then spent all of last year researching, developing and making 10 new films with the accompanying resources.
Amazing. And like I say, I love the idea of that collaboration because you kind of think sort of the umbrella of the BBC, they're all working together all the time, but of course they're all kind of doing their own thing. So bringing that together is obviously an exciting prospect.
It really was. Yeah, it is. I mean, there is a lot of collaboration and certainly more and more these days as well. But this particular one was really exciting collaboration, and to have the expertise from the different departments all working together to produce this one thing of really high quality that ticks all the boxes for all the different areas was just fantastic.
And you mentioned there about the orchestra members going into school sort of pre-pandemic, and I guess that's sort of starting to happen again now. What does that look like? Is it the entire orchestra going in? Is it a selection of musicians, or is it sort of specifically sort of programmed to obviously deliver a certain message?
All sorts. It honestly depends. It can be the whole orchestra, squeezed into a school hall, or it can be small groups of musicians who either go and perform or take part in creative workshops. It really depends. And, we've done all sorts of different things in the past. And last year was a bit of a hiatus. We kind of put all that face-to-face stuff on pause in order to make the films. And now we're sort of getting back out there. We have one... in one particular case, we work with a string orchestra to help support very young string players in developing their string skills, in the hope that they will continue individual lessons. And then, it's all about the talent pipeline for the orchestra. We want to inspire as many young people as possible to learn about the instruments, to be excited and see the joy that can be had from playing an instrument, but also with other people. So that's what it's all about for us.
Yeah, I mean, it makes such a difference. I mean, I've sort of told the story before on the podcast, but the only reason I started playing the drums or started doing music was because as I hit my secondary school, we had to learn an instrument, and our sort of music lessons were being part of a wind band. And I know that as funding cuts go on and there's less and less emphasis of it within the curriculum, it's really hard, like you say, to keep that pipeline going, to get people to have that experience of live music. And I can see why, sort of like say the stories and the animation and they can have that natural progression then into then, like I say, real life concerts, having people coming in, and even if you have to sort of weave it into school in a slightly different way than we might like it being sort of core in terms of the curriculum, I guess the more people you can reach and the more people you can get excited about it, as I was, that there is a world out there which people really can thrive in.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what's amazing is when we go into schools, I'm always astonished at how few children have had access to live music and seen instruments up close. So the more we can do that, the better. And that's one of the things I didn't mention about Musical Storyland. The whole point of the series is that children see the instruments. It's not just the soundtrack. They are an integral part of the storytelling, and across the series, you get to see every instrument in the orchestra at some point in one of the stories or other. And that was a really important part of what I wanted to do with the series.
And take us through sort of the journey of that, because, in terms of animation, how did your journey and your experience of that in terms of what you wanted to see, how that fitted in specifically with the music? And I know your background is sort of being a clarinet player, so I'm sort of curious as to that sort of journey into where you are now and that process.
Yeah, so alongside the musical performance, the films include, as you mentioned, animation, and also shots of children joining in, because that's also a really important part of it. But in relation to the animation in particular, it started back with the Gingerbread Man. I was really keen that we included animation in amongst the musical performance, because it's widely accepted that children love watching animation. They will, if you give them a number of things to click on, they're more than likely to choose the animated characters rather than the real life characters. And I suppose it's a way of bringing classical music in a more sort of up-to-date contemporary scenario. So yeah, having a smattering of animation was part of that, getting making it feel really attractive to children. But it's only a smattering. There's only 90 seconds of animation thereabouts in each of the episodes, so it is a really small proportion of the whole episode. And it was, it just helps tell the story. The films could exist without animation, actually, but it just adds to the excitement of it, I think, and brings it to life a bit. So, yeah, we wrote the scripts. The music was written then, and the animation was it was a really tight 10 minutes. It was very precise duration for each film, so we had only 10 minutes, and so it was a really interesting process to find just the right amount of animation, and it varies between stories. Some stories have more animation, some have less, but yeah, it was a really fun process working with the animators on that.
And in terms of sort of the age group, say CBeebies, what's the specific sort of target audience from that point of view?
So it was commissioned specifically for age 3 to 6, but I would say the films absolutely would go either way beyond that. children as old as 8, 9, 10 will really enjoy the films and get a lot from them, and younger ones do. We have quite an unusual number of video clips on social media of parents taking films of their, say, 18-month-old or 2-month-old, repeating the songs and chants, and we've seen a lot of the success in the social media that's shared with us, of really young ones really engaging with the music and the rhymes in the songs and stories.
I think for me, I'm sort of thinking back to when my kids were smaller as well, because it becomes a family experience, doesn't it? Especially when children are that young. You've got programs going on and you've got an older sibling or a younger sibling. And I think those particular sort of programs where everybody gets involved are really special. And I think just that just brings the idea of music being in the home, and I think that's such a great thing and such a great thing to share. And I know certainly in our household, just singing and having, I mean, they've got musicians as parents. I guess that's always going to have been the case. But even if that's not the case, like you say, children love to sing, they love to be part of something, and they love something which has that sort of continuity as well. And I think that's a fascinating thing when, like I say, when you've got just more than one thing happening.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Singing, children do love to sing. They very often don't even realise they're doing it. I was walking in the woods the other day with 2 little boys, and they started singing the song from the Three-Billied Goats Gruff. We were trip-trapping over bridges. I didn't prompt them at all. They did it all of their own back, and they just came out with the song. It's such a catchy song from Three-Billied Goats Gruff. They just instinctively started singing it as they went over the bridge. It was brilliant.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of the orchestra, and I'm sort of fascinated from sort of my own point of view, especially having worked with the orchestra in the past. A lot of people, when they get into the profession, they've performed, they've practiced, they love that kind of concert environment. Of course, with the BBC orchestras, there's lots of recording and stuff that goes on as well. But I'm always interested in the sort of the educational side of those things. Do people sort of get into it with that sort of education bent and really loving that side of things, or is it something that is sort of they train through as they're part of the orchestra, or is it sort of working on the job with people that are going through? Take us through that.
All of that. I mean, there isn't one size fits all, honestly. It really depends. Some people sort of arrive in the orchestra already with lots of experience and know they want it to be part of their work with the orchestra. Others may not have had much experience but are really keen, and we can provide those opportunities. So it really is, it varies depending on the individual. We try and provide as many opportunities as possible, and training is provided, and if someone's particularly keen, it's great. We have the sort of flexibility to provide opportunities and help develop individuals as well.
And so, when sort of leading those sorts of workshops, I know when I've done it with my workshops as well, there's something about the relationship that I think children suddenly realise through music, which is this is a different type of experience than what I'm used to in school, in that kind of more academic setting. And then when you start to be able to say, like, sort of bring the learning to life and to be able to sort of share those things, there's a spark that goes off, isn't there, which I think then becomes really, really exciting.
I think music is fun, and that's why children, really enjoy it. It's incredibly creative. You can very quickly create something out of nothing and perform it to your peers. An hour later, it's a very immediate thing that everyone can get involved with, and I think that's what it makes it really attractive for children.
And in terms of your role, sort of that digital in learning, it sounds like you were sort of integral to obviously the creation of this particular project. How does it work for you? Do you sort of have ideas that you can then run with? Have you got certain things that you have to fit in with what the orchestra are doing? How does that sort of work sort of hand in hand?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, a bit of everything. Yes, for me, it's really important to be face to face with people, but obviously, as a broadcaster and as the BBC, we can reach far more by using our broadcast networks. So I like to see it as a combination of the two. When we do face-to-face things, how can we turn that into a digital resource that other people around the country who aren't near to us can also benefit from? So I guess that it sums my job up in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, And I think that's the thing which I love about the opportunity that you certainly have within the BBC, because so much of this is dependent on the situation, the recording, the facilities, and all of that. So to have all that expertise on tap, and like I say, to be able to sort of have these projects ongoing, which you can then just capture in that way at such a high quality level and distribute to so many people. That's I just love the fact that we have that in this country, and the way that you're able to do that.
Yes, I think it is quite unique, and it does make the job incredibly exciting. It really does. We have a lot of sort of freedom, if you like, to as well. We have our commitments to the radio networks and so on, but there's also sort of space to record other projects, whatever it might be, whether it's for education or for iPlayer or something. And it's an area I really want to develop. We have a very small learning team. It's me and one other, so there's only so much two people can do. So it's a bit of a sort of slightly slower process than I might like, but yeah, we're getting there.
And to teach orchestra, because I know the BBC has multiple orchestras, do they sort of collaborate within themselves, or are the projects sort of orchestra centric? And I guess that depends on sort of location as well.
Yeah, so each orchestra is quite distinct. I mean, we've got one in Wales and one in Scotland, and then there's two in London and us in the north of England. And each orchestra does pride itself on being distinct from each other. Having said that, especially with the learning and education teams, I would say we do collaborate quite closely. We are developing a schools concert at the moment, which we will share between orchestras. And last year we were performing the CBeebies Ocean Adventure Prom. It started as a prom at the Royal Albert Hall, and each orchestra has picked it up and is able to tour it to different parts of the country, so that a far greater audience is able to see this particular show face to face. So there is certainly a lot more of that, and it is really exciting to work in that way.
And how does it work in terms of sort of picking presenters and those things? Because I know certainly from that sort of prom experience, there's something about the engagement, isn't there, of having presenters which children will have known from CBBC or one of the programs as well. Are they sort of love that interaction with the orchestra and the musical side as well?
Absolutely. It depends on the show or the production, really. Sometimes working with those celebrities that are well known to children is really important. Other times it might not be, and it might be that actually having a presenter who really understands music is more important. So it really does just depend, and we kind of do a bit of everything.
Yeah. And so projects coming up, have you got a sort of a list of things that you'd like to do for the next 5 or 10 years, or is it just a question of sort of tweaking ongoing things? How does that sort of looking forward work for
you? We've just got a new director, so I'm expecting us to develop a new strategy, so it's definitely work in progress. But immediately coming up, the thing I'm really working on at the moment is the live tour of Musical Storyland. So even though we made the series for television and for BBC Teach, I always knew that I would want to be performing it live as well, face to face. So that's what my plan is for this year. In fact, we had our first performance just a couple of days ago in Liverpool. We did The Great Race live to schools and, in fact, an adult audience. We were talking about age appropriateness of the stories earlier, and in fact the Friday night performance was adults only, so the stories definitely are suitable for any age. So yeah, the live tour of Musical Storyland is what's coming up in the next few months.
Fantastic. And how far afield do you go for that? Do you sort of stick to the north of England, or sort of how far around the country will you go?
Yes, we will prioritise the north, because it kind of is our patch, but we won't be limited to the north. It depends on which venues or festivals or so on sort of align with our priorities, and so we could end up anywhere in the UK.
And in terms of, I know the orchestra sometimes goes abroad as well. Does that become just a sort of a concert series as well, or are they able to take some of the sort of the learning aspect and some of that educational stuff with them in those situations?
Well, touring has changed a bit recently since COVID. There has been much less of it in the Philharmonic, and I've only been at the orchestra for about 6 years now. So in my time at the orchestra, there haven't been any touring projects that involved education. That's not to say there won't be in the future, And I know colleagues in Wales and Scotland and other orchestras have definitely toured sort of educational elements alongside their main concert series. So it is something that the BBC does generally.
Yeah. And take us a little bit into how this particular job that you have now sort of differs from your sort of previous experience, because I guess that works then across radio and sort of different TV elements as well.
Do you mean my career path, so the jobs
Yes,
that I've done before this particular one?
Yeah.
Yes. So there's quite a lot of similar skills. I guess the difference with this particular job is that I use my music skills much more than I have done on previous jobs. It's the first time, the second time that I've had a job involving music, but most of my career at the BBC has been absolutely nothing to do with music. I started in local radio, moved into Radio 4, did a stint on Radio 3, and then moved into websites because I was sort of in at the very beginning of website development when BBC was just starting out with websites, and that was really, really good fun and exciting. And we in the days when we used to hand code and write CMS and HTML and all those things. So I spent quite a lot of time in the digital part of the BBC on different genres, and eventually ended up using my first love, which is music, at the Philharmonic.
Yeah, I love that. It's amazing how these things sort of come full circle, isn't it? And you can sort of bring those things in. I think it's one of the reasons I love doing the podcast so much is that it's the performing element. It's sort of the live element that I sort of like from and I still do get the chance to perform, but there's something tangible about the same sort of emotion and situation. Maybe it's being an adrenaline junkie of some description. Who knows? It's that kind of thing which I really like. And in terms of sort of the education side and what you're sort of passionate about and doing now, is there a school experience or a teacher that you remember that had an impact on you, and is that sort of somewhere in the back of your mind sort of aided or certainly supported what you've been able to do now?
Without a doubt, my music teacher at high school, I don't think I would have done music if it hadn't been for him. The music lessons were just such good fun. He was so inspiring and he was so passionate about music, and provided amazing opportunities, through school choir and orchestra and all sorts of different things, that I really got the bug for music because of him, I think. So I don't think I'd be here now if it wasn't for him.
And I certainly can sort of understand that. It was definitely the passion and the drive from our music teachers that were there, and a supportive head teacher as well, which I think makes a big difference. And you'll probably see this when you're going in doing your projects as well. It really comes from the fact that the people within the school really know the power and the joy that it can bring and how beneficial it can be across the board for children. And then it becomes a very easy process, I think. But like I say, it just needs that one person to really sort of get that sort of momentum going.
Yeah, it really does. Sorry, were you gonna?
No, that's Karen.
It's so true what you say about about that one person, because we've tried to work with some schools, and if the head isn't enlightened or doesn't get it about music, then the project can't succeed. It's been really interesting that discovering that about, because I've always assumed that everyone sees the value in music. How can you not see the value in it? But people really don't. You can't assume that people see the value. Either you have to educate them, or work with people who do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I say, as time goes on and there's less music in schools in some situations, it's harder for people to realise that's what schools were like, or the opportunities were like, or that environment was an integral part of it. And I know it's very difficult these days in terms of Ofsted and assessments and all of those things, but I think the number of people that I speak to, when they have that sense of the whole child, and whether it's sport, whether it's music, but that sense of everything you learn with all of those things, they know the children become the best versions of themselves. And so whether you have to have it in school or whether you don't have to have it in school, or whether it has to look like this or that, if you sort of build it up as part of the environment, everything seems to thrive. But it takes a long time and a lot of sort of perception and understanding for that to sort of filter through, I think, and for you to tell that story to all the relevant people, whether it's governors and parents, and the children themselves obviously love it when it has that opportunity. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or indeed is there a piece of advice you might give your younger self now looking back? And I do often caveat this with the fact that we know we might not take that when we're younger, but if we haven't been told it, then we wouldn't be able to take it on board anyway.
Yeah, I think it would be to listen carefully to people. I am quite guilty of kind of jumping to conclusions or sort of imagining the answer rather than actually listening properly. I would definitely tell my younger self to listen more carefully in conversation with people.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And listening rather than talking, which is something that I have to make sure that I do a lot of as well, just to, like I say, take it all in. And certainly, I don't know if it's the male side of me, that kind of, the wanting to fix something or to share that opinion rather than just listening and taking it as you go through. such an important factor. And is there a resource you'd like to share? And this can be personal or professional, but something which has had an impact on
you. I think, yeah, I mean, it's something I worked on, which has been sort of made a difference in my life. And I suppose that, and it's BBC 10 Pieces, which is a music education initiative from the BBC, the BBC's biggest investment in music education, which is now 10 years old. And I worked on that project when it began 10 years ago, when I was much younger and more junior. And it really opened my eyes to the power of broadcasting. And even though I had been working in the BBC for a while before that, it was really astonishing how the BBC was able to galvanise the whole of the UK and work with so many different collaborators around the UK, all the music services, various stakeholders, other music organisations and charities, all for the one purpose of inspiring children with music. And I kind of had never experienced anything on the scale of that before, and it was really enlightening to be part of that.
And I know certainly from my sort of education experience and in various forums and things, so many people will say, where can I find a resource related to this, or where can I do this, or where can I do that? And so often it's that kind of go and check out 10 pieces, see how you can bring it into what you need. It's exactly what you need to get your sort of project going. And like I say, just to have it front of mind for so many people, let alone the fact it's a great resource as well, like I say, is testament to exactly what was put together.
Yeah, it is. We haven't. It's kind of been slightly dormant for the last couple of years, but that doesn't. But people are still using it, and I'm part of various Key Stage 2 and 3 Facebook groups, and almost every day someone will ask for help with something, and someone will give the answer of go to 10 pieces. So it's amazing, yeah, the success of it.
And you mentioned obviously fire, as in from education on fire, is really important for us, and by that we always mean feedback, inspiration, resilience and empowerment. What is it that strikes you when you hear those words?
Well, I immediately thought of one particular person who was really influential in my life, and that was Katie Jones, who created BBC 10 Pieces. Sadly, she died about 9 years ago, but I was really lucky to work with her during the first year of 10 Pieces. She was an incredible force, and I mean, not only was her idea astonishing, and 10 years on, we're still talking about BBC 10 Pieces, but she was an amazing person to work with because she was inspirational, and she was unbelievably resilient, and sort of encouraged that in her whole team, and really empowered us to do the best that we could. She trusted us to, she recruited her team and trusted us all to do the best we possibly could, and gave us regular feedback. If we did something great, she told us, and I don't think that happens enough. So yeah.
Definitely is. I think that idea of community, I mean, feedback is incredible. I think when you're open to it, and when you have the environment that it feels like it's always a positive situation. And I think it, like I say, it can be really hard for that to be the case, but when you find those relationships and you find that environment that you can work and thrive in, it really does make a massive difference. So yeah, it's such an incredible legacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing all of this. It's fascinating to sort of always hear behind, like say, behind the website, behind the music, behind those things that they're doing. Where's the best place for people to go and find out more about it?
About Musical Storyland? Well, the films are on CBeebies. However, from the educationalist point of view, the best place to go is BBC Teach. All of the films and the accompanying activities and printouts and PDFs and all the things that are incredibly useful in the classroom are all there on the BBC Teach website. More than enough material to keep you busy throughout a whole year, if not more, for early years and Key Stage 1 music lessons.
Fantastic. And I think it is that kind of having everything together, like you say, all the resources, everything in one place, and with such sort of a trusted organisation as well, you know that not only do you get fantastic content, but you sort of have that support above and beyond other situations as well. So Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I really, really do appreciate time. Keep up the great work, and I'm always fascinated to hear how musical people and musicians have sort of found their way into different parts of life, and specifically, like say, your journey from musician into something else and then back into the music world within the education. Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and thank you so much for being part of the Education on Fire community. Links and details of today's podcast are in the description, and if you would like to support the show with a small donation, that's a wonderful way to help me bring you more creative and inspiring learning. Please visit educationonfire.com/support, and remember, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.